Oh, hi, my name's Waldo. Usually I watch the news with my conservative friend Thomas, but today he is out, so I am going to react to a different conservative. His name is Ron DeSantis. You probably heard of him. He's going to run for president? Terrible idea. Nobody should do that. But here we go. This video picks up after
All
the,
right, I think we're broadcasting.
half hour
Man, I think we melted
of really bad tech issues. So there's that.
the internet there.
Yeah, that was insane. Sorry, we actually doing this from David Sachs's Twitter account because it looks like doing it from mine basically broke the Twitter system. Um, anyway, thanks everyone for joining. We're incredibly excited to announce that if you want to have Governor DeSantis on with us with this historic announcement, and then look forward to live Q&A from
Was it historic?
the audience. So, yeah,
Lots of people have
with
run
that.
for the president.
Yeah, I mean, so Governor DeSantis, are you there? Can you hear us? I think you broke. All
I'm
right,
here.
excellent. I know. I think you broke the internet there. We had over 500,000 people in one Twitter space, and it was growing by like 50,000 a minute. So, congrats on breaking the internet there.
Well, yeah. I mean, try some new things. You're gonna.
Yes.
It's adventurous. So.
Yes.
But
So
I think the value here is actually really high for
Super genius,
you're
Elon
directly
Musk.
from
Can't get his own
presidential
systems to work.
candidates and to answer a Q&A live, and you can get a sense for how a candidate really is, and where it's not just canned speeches and teleprompters.
No canned speeches, you guys.
In fact, you can
That's
tell
gonna be
by
great.
the some of the mistakes that it's real.
Yeah.
So, anyway, with that, I guess I should turn it over to.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's see. So, yeah, Governor, there's been a lot of speculation over the last couple of months about your plans. I understand that you may have an announcement to make.
He might have an announcement.
A record audience assembled
And
here.
what it could be.
Probably the biggest room that's probably ever been assembled online. What would you like to tell them?
Well, I am running for President of the United States to
Shocker.
lead
Terrible
our
idea.
great American comeback. Look, we know our
Comeback.
country's going in the
Make
wrong
America
direction.
come back.
We see it with our eyes, and we feel it in our bones. Our southern borders collapse. Drugs are pouring into the country. Our cities are being hollowed out by spiking crime. The federal government's making it harder for the average family to make ends meet and to attain and maintain
Fear mongering. Lots and lots and lots of fear mongering. Are you afraid? Be afraid.
a middle-class lifestyle. And our president, well, he lacks vigor, flounders in the face of our nation's challenges, and he takes his cues from the woke mob.
The woke mob. They're coming to get you. The woke mob. I wonder what a woke mob looks like. I've never seen one. Have you seen one? Please let me know in the comments below.
I think it has to be this way. American decline is not inevitable. It is a choice. And we should choose a new direction, a path that will lead to American revitalization.
A new direction, like going backwards.
We must restore sanity to our nation. This means embracing fiscal and economic sanity. Stop pricing hardworking Americans out
If
of
you
a
saw my
good
last
standard
video,
of
Republicans
living
are
through inflationary
anti
borrow, print, and spend.
reality. So it kills me when they say things like common sense and sanity when they are opposite of reality.
Policies, and please embrace American energy independence. This also means replacing the woke mind virus with
Woke.
reality, facts, and enduring principles. Merit must trump identity politics. We must return normalcy to our communities. America is
Normal.
a sovereign country. Our borders
Normal.
must be respected. We cannot have foreigners pouring into our country illegally by the millions. We cannot allow drug cartels to poison our population with fentanyl. Public deserves safe communities, and law and order must be maintained in American cities. We can't have inmates
Law and order.
running
It's a
the
joke.
asylum. And we
When
must
Republicans says
reject
law and order,
attacks
it's
on the
nonsense.
men and women of law enforcement. We also must reestablish integrity in our institutions. This includes the military. I'm proud to be a Navy veteran, an Iraq veteran, and I revere our services. But
Is he
when
going to build
revered
the
institutions
military
like
back up
those
again?
of our military are more concerned with matters
Hasn't
not
gone
central
anywhere.
to the mission, whether it's global warming or gender ideology
Global
and
warming
pronouns,
makes a big deal.
morale declines and recruiting
Ugh.
suffers. And you need to eliminate the
Recruiting suffers because they don't want to die. for nonsense, like in Iraq and Afghanistan.
These distractions, and we need to get focused on the core mission. We also cannot have true constitutional government if the most significant issues are decided by the whims of unelected bureaucrats rather than the people's elected representatives. Reestablishing integrity in our institutions means we must reinvigorate our constitutional system by returning the government to its rightful owners, we the people. No social or economic transformation without representation. Truth needs to be our foundation. Common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue. And in Florida, we
I thought we weren't having canned speeches. Come on, Elon.
proved it could be done. We chose facts over fear, education over indoctrination, law and order over rioting and disorder. We held the line when freedom hung in the balance. And we're thriving as a result. Florida is the nation's fastest growing state. We're number one in net in-migration, number one in new business formations, recently ranked number one in education. We have a 50-year low crime
Number
rate,
one in education,
one
I
of
don't
the
believe that
lowest
at all.
tax and debt
I
per
do not believe
capita
that.
in America. But we also understand governing is not entertainment. It's not about building a
I'll look it up
brand or
later.
virtue signaling. It is about delivering results. And our results in Florida have been second to none. We can and we must deliver big results for America. I pledge to be an energetic executive that will take on the important issues. Biden's pursued inflationary policies that are hurting working people. We will reverse those policies and we'll build an economy where working Americans can achieve a good standard of living. Biden's opened the southern border and allowed massive amounts of drugs to pour into the country. We'll shut down the border, construct a border wall, and hold the drug cartels accountable.
Border wall doesn't work.
Biden's
Never
embraced
has.
medical
Never will.
authoritarianism, such as unconstitutional COVID vax mandates.
COVID
We will ensure
vax
that those
mandates.
violations of liberty can never happen again. Biden's allowed woke ideology to drive his agenda. We will never surrender to the woke mob,
Woke
and we will leave
mobs.
woke ideology
I want
in
a
the
shirt that says
dustbin
woke
of
mob.
history.
I might get one.
Biden's also politicized the military and caused recruiting to plummet. We will eliminate ideological agendas from our military, focus the military on the core mission, and we will reverse the poor recruiting trends. Finally, Biden's weaponized the power of the administrative state to advance his left-wing agenda. We will
I wish he had a left-wing agenda. I really
reconstitutionalize
do.
the executive branch, and we'll bring the administrative state to heel. Now, you can't do any of that if you don't win. There is no substitute for victory. We must end the culture of losing that has infected the Republican Party in recent years. The tired dogmas of the past are inadequate for a vibrant future. We must look forward, not backwards. We need the courage to lead, and we must have the strength
Republicanism
to win.
is a look
And
backwards.
to
It
voters
always
who are
is.
participating in this primary process, my pledge to you is this. If you nominate me, you can set your clock to January 20th, 2025 at high noon, because on the west side of the U.S. Capitol, I will be taking the oath of office as the 47th President of the United States. No excuses. I will get the job done. Now, these past few years have given me a new appreciation for the fragility of our freedoms. I never thought I would see things in America that we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, but our founding fathers were keenly aware of the fragility of freedom. When they framed our Constitution, they came armed with having studied the history of every republic and the history of mankind, and they noticed that all of those experiments only had one thing in common, and it was this. Every single one of them had failed. And so they knew it fell to our country, the United States of America, to determine whether people could really govern themselves. Could we have a society based on the idea that our rights are God-given, not government-granted, and that society functions based on the rule of law, not the rule of individual men? And when Dr. Benjamin Franklin
Rule
walked
of
out of
law,
that
not
convention,
individual
he was
men.
asked, did you deliver a republic or a
This guy seems
monarchy? He said, a
authoritarian to me.
republic if
That would
you
be
can
individual
keep it.
man.
They knew freedom didn't run on autopilot. They knew each generation would have a responsibility to safeguard freedom, and it's our responsibility to do so at this important juncture in our nation's history. We have a lot of work to do to ensure the country gets back on track. I ask everybody listening to please join me on this mission. Please invest in our campaign by going to rondesantis.com and making a donation. Thank you. God bless, and I look forward to the discussion.
All right, thank you, Governor. Appreciate that. I guess just as a first follow-up, here. Thank you for putting up with these technical issues. I think we're definitely breaking new ground here. As far as I know, no major presidential candidate has ever announced their candidacy on social media this way. Certainly in a Twitter space. So
Right, they do it on the
thank you for
news
doing that.
or
What made you want to kind of take the
TV.
chance of doing it this way, as opposed to just doing it on cable news or the usual way?
Well, when COVID hit, I had to make decisions about, do you go with the crowd or do you look at the data yourself and cut against the grain? And I chose to do
And
the
lie to people?
latter.
Yeah,
I
he chose
faced
lie to
huge
people. Okay, great.
blowback for doing that from the bureaucracy, from
Everybody going with the
elites, from
crowd
the
was
media.
correct.
But my view was I had to look out for the people I represented, prefer protecting their jobs over trying to safeguard my own political hide. But it was very, very lonely in a lot of those decisions. And
Because you were saying things that were lies.
part of the reason it was so lonely is because there was a concerted effort to try to stifle dissent. There was an
Because you're wrong.
official narrative about lockdowns, about closing schools, about forced masking, about all these different things that we had to navigate during COVID. And it was an orthodoxy being enforced by the major tech platforms in conjunction with the federal government. And if we can't have an honest debate in a free country about issues that affect hundreds of millions of people, like lockdowns, then what good is the First Amendment at that point? Those are precisely the times when we needed to have debate be robust. You should not be taking down articles that criticize those draconian policies, and yet that's exactly what happened.
They were wrong and they were harmful to the public. They ought to be taken down. You buffoon.
So it occurred to me that if that had continued, I think free speech in this country was on its way out the door. And so when Elon Musk stepped up to purchase Twitter, he paid a lot of money for it, and I'm sure because he's a good businessman, Elon, I'm sure you'll end up making money off it. But the bottom
Oh,
line is, you have to
maybe.
put
I
your
don't
money
think
where
so,
your
though.
mouth is, because I think you recognize that you can't have a free society unless we have the freedom to debate the most important issues that are affecting our civilization. That did not happen during COVID. The truth was censored repeatedly. And
Because it
now
was
that
lies.
Twitter is in the hands of a free speech advocate, that would not be able to happen again on this Twitter platform. So I think what was done with Twitter is really significant
Free
for the
speech
future of
advocate. Is
our
he going to put
country.
left-wing people on
We
here? Is he going to
cannot
put
have a society
Joe
where the
Biden up on
government is
Twitter?
colluding
Give
with
him an hour
major
to
tech
talk?
platforms to enforce an
Bet he
orthodoxy.
doesn't.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're absolutely committed to freedom of speech and a level playing field, and just a vigorous debate. And hopefully, this can be a platform that brings people of divergent political views to exchange those views, and perhaps some minds will be changed one way or the other. And but it's just incredibly important, as you highlight, that the First Amendment is irrelevant if uh, all the media and all the and the government are operating in lockstep. It makes the most important amendment, the one that was most urgently added to the Constitution, moot if you cannot have free and open debate. Um, so Twitter was indeed expensive, but free speech is priceless.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Governor, I'm going to ask some questions while we get some other kind of speakers in the queue to ask questions. I think maybe some people knew this announcement was coming because there's been no shortage of hit pieces on you
Yeah.
in the press over the last week or two. I want to ask you about some of these accusations that are being leveled at you. Last week, the NAACP issued a travel advisory against your state, claiming that Florida is not a safe place for minorities to visit. What do you say to those who've been advised that somehow they aren't welcome in your state?
Claiming that Florida is unsafe is a total farce. I mean, are you kidding me? You look at cities around this country, they are awash in crime. In Florida, our crime rate is at a 50-year low. You look at the top 25 cities for crime in America, Florida does not have a single one amongst the top 25. And if you look at cities like
Not
Baltimore
police
and
violence.
Chicago, you got kids more likely to get shot than to receive a first class education. Yet I don't see the NAACP batting an eye about all the outrage and the carnage that's happening in those areas. So this is a political stunt. These left-wing groups have been doing it for many, many years. And at the end of the day, what they're doing is colluding with legacy media to try to manufacture a narrative. Now, the good news is fewer and fewer Americans are
Where's
gullible
Florida?
enough to believe
Where's
this
Florida?
drivel. And platforms like Twitter are there where people can debunk these lies in real time. And I would just say, as an American citizen, if you are uncritically accepting narratives spun
Florida.
by legacy media and left-wing
It's
groups,
higher
you're
than
failing at your
these
job
other places. It's higher
of
than New
being a
York.
conscientious
Florida's higher
citizen.
than
And I
higher
think
crime
people
rate
just
than New
see
York.
right through it. And oh, by the way,
Oh, but the
have any of
cities.
these travel advisories, because they've been doing this for a while, all these left-wing groups, have any of them worked? Well, we're the #1 state for net in-migration and have been every year since I've been governor. We just capped the highest quarter for tourism in the history of the state of Florida. And our view is we want everybody to succeed regardless of their skin color. We don't divvy up people by race. At the same time, it is worth pointing out that we have in Florida more black-owned businesses than any state in the nation. And
it's very woke of them.
We've also had more African Americans lead state agencies under my administration than at any time in Florida history. But with us, you know they're there because of merit, not because we're trying to play identity politics. And
That
if you
you
want to
just
look
brought
at
it up. That makes it
education,
identity politics, you
the
goof.
black students in Florida perform much higher than black students in most other states. We rank #3 in fourth grade reading and #2
That's
in
identity
fourth grade
politics you're
math
playing right there, boss.
amongst our black student population. And oh, by the way, the head of the NAACP lives in Florida, and a lot of their board members have put out on social media during my governorship Florida vacations where they seem to be having an awful good time.
That's great. Well, I mean, Florida's a great state, and I think the people realize that. Some of the things that are being said are just truly absurd. I mean, I saw some headline from the Atlantic, basically claiming that anyone who listens to this Spaces on Twitter is basically a Nazi.
That was the Atlantic, and then Vanity Fair said that that you were hosting or interviewing because David Duke wasn't available.
Oh yes.
Although I'm not totally sure
That's funny.
who they were saying was David Duke. I don't know if it was you or Governor DeSantis. It's sort of a little bit unclear, but
I think this is a function of the legacy media, these corporate journals. They're in their little bubble. And to draw allusions to stuff like that, I mean, how crazy do you have to be? But in their little bubble, it sounds like they're making some type of profound point. And so part of, I think, what Twitter is standing for is people should be exposed to different viewpoints. And I think the elites in our society have tried to cluster themselves to where their assumptions are never challenged. And that's not a good way, I think, to live. It's also not a good way to be a critical thinker, because no one's ever going to question obviously wrong assumptions because everybody around you shares them.
Absolutely.
And I think they become totally hysterical because they don't like the idea that their control over the media is being, disintermediated.
Yeah.
Because now, candidates for president can just speak directly to people through platforms like Twitter.
Yeah, I mean,
they could before.
The
they always have.
Twitter and things like Spaces are that. Although I happen to be hosting it, I had to switch over to David hosting it because my account was actually
just too much interest. But
my account was breaking the system. But there's really never been a mechanism before where someone could address the nation, or anyone who wanted to listen to them could, from anywhere in the world, United States or anywhere. So I think this is a really profound change.
They had so many tech
also,
problems with it. It's like a Ventrilo server.
Whether the media reports something, an article is
the
is true or
first
not.
presidential announced the presidency over Ventrilo. Very nice.
Or a magazine, and there's only one thing you really put on the cover of a magazine. So that whoever's deciding that is deciding to not talk about other things. Whereas with a public digital town square like we have here,
Digital Town Square.
Possible
Oh,
for
good.
the public to choose the narrative. It empowers the people instead of a very tiny elite cabal, which I don't recognize the irony of me using that phrase.
Yeah, irony of you using it. Yes,
it's true, and you judge by the results that this is a means for the people to decide the narrative, and for the people to decide what which way a debate will go, not sort of 5 editors-in-chiefs of a few newspapers, basically.
Yeah, and I think one of the really crazy things that happened during COVID is that social networks really started censoring dissenting viewpoints on
Lies.
COVID, medical
Lies.
viewpoints that ended up being
Medical
totally
lies, yes.
correct in lockstep
No, not
with
correct.
what the
Lies.
mainstream media was doing. So basically, big tech platforms were undermining their main reason for existing, which is giving people a choice. And actually,
Between truth
there's
and lie.
somebody who
Yeah.
I think knows more about that than any of us, which is Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's a professor of medicine at Stanford. I want to pull him in here. Jake, you go ahead and unmute yourself if you
Oh, good. The
can.
people get to talk to him instead
It'd
of
be
the
great
elites.
to hear from you. I know that during COVID, you worked with Governor DeSantis. It'd be great just to hear a little bit about your interactions and if you have a question for the governor.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute honor to work with Governor DeSantis, and I was really impressed by his decision making in the face of an absolute firestorm of criticism. But he, Governor, you did the right thing when you opened the schools. And my
No.
kids in California for a year and a half didn't see the inside of a classroom.
And they didn't get
Whereas
COVID.
Florida kids were in school, and you can see it in the
Getting
results.
COVID.
And the learning loss numbers are so much better in Florida. I'm really curious, Governor. As you're running for president, what are your thoughts about reforming, the public health authority in the United States and the federal government, the CDC, the FDA, the NIH? How do you see the reforms we need so that the mistakes of the lockdowns that happened
Mistakes of
during
the
the pandemic
lockdowns.
don't happen
Fuck this
again
guy.
when there's another pandemic?
Well, first, we need an honest reckoning about what happened during COVID. And the only honest reckoning is that all of those agencies, all of the elites, the public health establishment, they failed.
The smart people.
They instituted bad policies. Obviously, it's a novel virus, but I think what happened was when the data was becoming more and more apparent that the path they were on was wrong, they doubled down and wanted to do it even more. And
They yell at Fauci for flip-flopping. Oh, 1 mask, 2 masks, no mask. No, you don't need a mask. Yes, you do. Now we need 2. They yell at him for flip-flopping, but they also yell at him for doubling down. You can't have both.
I really believe had Florida not just kind of stood in the way, I think this country would have had rolling lockdowns for probably a 2-year period. And so their impulses were
To stop the spread of a
authoritarian.
virus, yes.
They were not following the data. And
They're
I think the U.S.
authoritarians.
government needs to acknowledge the failures. And I think all of those agencies need to be cleaned out. What I saw just dealing
And replaced
with
with
them
ideologues,
was I
Republican
saw
ideologues. Yeah, that'd be great.
interest in the narrative and in politics over evidence-based reasoning and evidence-based medicine. And so I don't have confidence that those agents
The evidence suggests that lockdowns work, masks work, hand washing and social distancing works, and ivermectin doesn't.
are up to the task. And I think you need major overhaul of the whole enchilada with respect to public health in this country.
Can I follow up with that? I mean, I think the other thing that I saw during the pandemic, Governor, and you was subject to it just as much as I was when we were talking about COVID. YouTube censored a video of us speaking about in a roundtable that you hosted on COVID policy. There's so much of the federal government infrastructure went into suppressing honest scientific discussion during the
Lies.
pandemic. So
They
it's
were
not
lies.
just public health agencies,
If
but
YouTube
other
blocked you, it's because
agencies
you were lying,
inside the federal government that
saying something
worked to
dangerous.
suppress the speech of Americans. And I'd love to hear
No
your
question.
thoughts
Suppress
about
your dangerous
No question.
speech.
So I'm actually in Florida.
Your misinformation.
We recognize the danger there. So I'm actually going to be signing a digital bill of rights for Florida pretty soon, which will
Oh
bar
God, I got to look that
all
up.
state and local
Digital
government
Bill of
officials
Rights.
from colluding or working with a technology company for the purpose of censorship of speech, because
Ron DeSantis sure would dislike it if a politician were colluding with a big tech company as he's here on Twitter with Elon Musk. I don't know what to say.
You're exactly right. You had people in the White House, you had people in all these other agencies working with these platforms to try to take it down. And oh, by the way, what did they censor Dr. Bhattacharya for. It was a roundtable discussion that I led and convened. We had Dr. Bhattacharya, MD, PhD from
That
Stanford.
doesn't mean you can't
We
be
had
wrong.
Martin Kulldorff from Harvard Medical School, and we had Sunetra Gupta from Oxford, who was generally viewed as one of the best epidemiologists across the pond until she
Doesn't mean you can't be
became
wrong.
anti-lockdown. So these are all eminent people. And what are we discussing? We're discussing whether there's any scientific basis to force a school child to wear a mask for 8 hours a day. They all agreed there was no basis to do it and that you should
They're
not
full
have
of shit
school
then.
mask mandates. YouTube thought that that was, quote, anti-science and
It
that that
probably
should be
was.
taken down.
Yeah, it
But
probably
even
was.
at that point, we had already had enough experience in Florida where you had some schools that had done it before the state banned the mandates. You had some schools that had done it, some schools didn't, and the results were no different. And yet his video was taken down by Google YouTube. So it was a huge, huge problem. And yes, I think the federal government, FBI, DHS, any of the health agencies, it's unconstitutional for them to be delegating speech restriction to a private company. You can't do indirectly what the Constitution would clearly forbid you to do
The
directly.
private company did it, not the government, which means it
Let
wasn't
me
against your
let me
First
pull
Amendment.
in.
Get
We
over
have Congressman Thomas Massey. If you're there, go ahead and unmute yourself. I mean, what we're talking about here is, I think, really unconstitutional actions
No.
by federal
Nonsense.
agencies. Congressman Massey, I know that you've been involved in this problem of government agencies being weaponized and used against the American people in an inappropriate way. Do you have a comment on this? And do you have a question for Governor DeSantis?
Well, first of all, let me say a big thank you to Elon Musk for buying Twitter and exposing all of this. On our weaponization committee, we wouldn't know so much of it if he hadn't
Keep
done this,
kissing his
almost
ass.
as a public service to the First Amendment. It's a disturbing trend. Government, as the governor said, the government is colluding with big
The
corporations.
government is
We found
colluding
out
with
this week from an
corporations. Thank you, Elon Musk, for buying it. Thank you for Elon Musk buying it and giving us a place to talk. I sure do hate it when the government colludes with big corporations. They don't even hear it. They don't even know that they are so contradictory. They don't know. They can't tell.
FBI whistleblower that Bank of America voluntarily gave names of and information on anybody who bought a hot dog in Washington, D.C. from January 5th to January 7th, and then overlaid that with gun purchases that they had on record anywhere in the country for
Sounds
any
like
period
detective
of
work.
time. And just they say they voluntarily gave that to the FBI. So that's disturbing to me. By the way, I've never met Elon Musk, but I'm one of your biggest fans. I'm the first congressman to have a Tesla. I'm on
Thank you.
I'm on Starlink, and I would have bought a Powerwall, but I'm off the grid, and you wouldn't sell me one, so I had to make one with a wrecked Model S, and it's been running our house for 5 years. But my
And just for the record, I was with Thomas our first year in Congress. He's got the Tesla, but his license plate is Kentucky Coal. So it's he's probably one of the only people that have that in the country.
Thanks for outing me, Governor DeSantis. But no, so Governor
They don't
DeSantis,
know how
my
hypocritical
question
they
to
are.
you
They don't even know.
is, you served here in Congress for 6 years with me, and why is it that Congress is so feckless at reining in these government agencies, and what do you think we need to do? And if you were president, what would you urge Congress, or what bills would you like to see and sign to rein in this sort of overreach of government bureaucracy?
Well, first, I think there's a lot that the executive branch can do, and all I will say when it comes to these agencies, we'll go into this a little bit more as the campaign goes on. But buckle up when I get in there, because the status quo is not acceptable, and we are going to make sure that we reconstitutionalize this government. And these agencies are totally out of control. There's no accountability, and we are going to bring that in a very big way. Now, part of the reason it's gotten so bad, power's been consolidated and effectively a fourth branch of government, because Congress hasn't used its two main powers that it has under the Constitution. First, the power of the purse. If an agency is gauging in
Yeah, I almost agree with this. Congress doesn't want to do anything. Congress is scared. Congress is full of cowards who don't want to make any votes or take any stands.
conduct that is outside the realm of what is legal, or you think it's not good for the public interest, then you can remove the funding for those operations. There's nothing that they're not entitled to get the same level of funding every year, and yet Congress runs the government on autopilot, either continuing resolutions or massive omnibus
Because they
spending
don't want to make
bills. So
decisions.
these
They're scared.
agencies are all bulletproof. They know that they're going to end up getting something similar or more every single year, and it creates an incentive for them to abuse their power. The other thing you can do is actually legislate, so you're not delegating to the bureaucracy key issues regarding how to enforce federal law. You should define what you want. All they should be doing is implementing. Instead, Congress will basically give an invitation for the bureaucracy to make really important substantive decisions. And so Congress may never vote on something, and the bureaucracy will cite a law from 20 years ago and do things that are going to transform our society or our country. That is not the way the founding fathers drew up the Constitution.
So would you sign the Reins Act? We passed it out of Judiciary today.
Oh, yeah, no,
You
of
want
course. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. That would, I think, be a great check for that. I also think that we're going to have a
All right, Thomas. I'm agreeing with him on a thing.
good chance to see some of the Chevron deference really curtailed or maybe even eliminated based on the U.S. Supreme Court's upcoming jurisprudence. And I think that's another reason why the bureaucracy has become so powerful, because courts have basically been told they can pretty much do what they want, and courts are supposed to just defer. I don't think that that's actually correct. I think the courts, they have to make a judgment about what does the law actually say, and you can't just defer to quote unquote experts in the bureaucracy.
Thank you.
All right, shifting gears, Governor, I want to ask you another topic that's been in the news a lot is Disney. They blamed you for canceling plans for $1 billion investment in Florida. Said they were canceling 2,000 jobs. I saw other reports that suggested Disney was going to make the cuts anyway, and due to a larger, budget cutting initiative. Regardless of why they did it, why do you feel your fight with Disney remains important? Considering you already beat them on the parental rights bill that they opposed? And what
Already
would you
beat them.
say to some of your opponents in this race who argue that the fight has dragged on too long?
So, first of all, Florida stands for the protection of children. We believe jamming gender ideology in elementary school is wrong. Disney obviously supported injecting gender ideology in elementary school. They did oppose our parents' rights legislation. And the fact is, when they opposed it, that was a big deal, because for 50 years, anytime Disney wanted something in Florida politics, they pretty much got it. But not
Because they're a giant employer, and they have a huge amount of real estate, and they own a lot of the places, and the businesses all revolve around it. That's how capitalism and republicanism work together.
Not this time. I signed the bill. We did, as you say, win on the issue. But what
You won on
happened
that issue.
was
They're coming
Disney's
for you.
posturing, some of the other
You're going to
statements
fail.
that their executives were making, kind of the corporate culture, had really been outed as trying to inject matters of sex into the programming for the youth. And I think a lot of parents, including me, look at that and say, that's not appropriate. I mean, we want our kids to be able to just be kids, and that's kind of our mantra. So you had this setup that Disney engineered many decades ago, where they actually had their own government that they controlled with no accountability. They were exempt from the laws that all their competitors had to follow, massive tax breaks, and they even racked up municipal debt. And Florida basically put them on a pedestal many decades ago and joined the state with this one company at the hip. We just didn't
That's
feel that
republicanism.
we were comfortable maintaining that relationship. And so we ended their self-governing status. So Disney has to live under the same laws as everybody. They got to pay the same taxes as everybody. And obviously they'll be responsible for those debts. So the reason why there's a quote fight is just because they filed a lawsuit against the state of Florida, trying to get their special privileges reinstituted. But I don't think that that's good policy. And I think some of these Republicans that are taking Disney's side, they're basically
And Disney's
showing
money.
themselves to be corporatists, because these are all
Yeah.
corporate goodies.
Republicans
This is
are
not the way
corporatists,
you would
yes.
run a competitive economy. And the arrangement had really outlived its usefulness, but it persisted because Disney was so politically powerful. I think the company's ethos have changed in a way that's alienated a lot of people in our legislature. And
Wokeism gets you money, more customers, pay for your services if you act like you are progressive and woke. This isn't a change in ethos. This is what's always been true.
in Florida, and so there was really no justification to keep it. But make no mistake, they're suing to try to get special privileges. People are making money in Florida hand over fist because we have a great business climate. That's not good enough for them. They want to be treated differently than Universal and SeaWorld, and we don't think that that's appropriate. So, I think that they should withdraw the lawsuit, but obviously we're going to defend our actions because we think.
Yeah, if the government's actions impact Disney's bottom line, they're going to sue and be upset about it because they're a business who's intended to make money. This is a capitalist problem. So, Mr. DeSantis, this is a capitalism flaw.
Think we have the right to do what we did.
It's funny. The media used to criticize Republicans for being in the pocket of big corporations, and now they're attacking you because you're not.
Well, not only
It's a bad guy fight. I hope they both lose somehow.
that, David, it's interesting because the media in Florida for years had hammered Disney, and they would point out like that this was not a good arrangement because Disney was not accountable to anyone. I mean, when
Bad guy
the
fight.
state control
Maybe
board
they'll
took
kill each other.
over this district, the firefighters came to the board and they said, "Hey, we weren't getting survivor benefits for some of these widows," and so the state control board actually paid out some of the benefits that they were getting stiffed on. There were a lot of people in Central Florida who were really thankful that there was some accountability being brought to bear because, I mean, it's human nature. If there's no accountability over any individual or entity, of course, they're going to behave differently than if you have normal accountability. But the media was always very
He's on board
hostile
for
to that.
regulations.
But just because I happen to be involved in bringing it back to reality and making sure that they were under the same laws, well, then all of a sudden they're running to Disney's defense. I mean, are you kidding me? And oh, by the way, on this project, they had announced this many years ago. They had not done anything for it, but that is actually not in Reedy Creek. So that was in a different part of Orlando. And so none of the issues that are involved in their suit would have made a difference there. Obviously, as a publicly traded corporation, they have a fiduciary duty to do what's best for their shareholders. So I'm assuming if they were in better financial shape and they saw the project as lucrative, they would have gone forward with it. But I think clearly they've had some problems with their stock price and a lot of other issues. And I'd also just finally point out, nobody probably has made Disney more money than me because they were open during COVID and they were closed in California. And that went on for many, many months where literally
Super spreader
I
events.
had all
He's
the
proud
theme
of them.
parks in Florida opened in 2020. People are going. It's safe.
He's
They're
spreading
having
COVID.
fun.
They're
And the
having fun.
California parks were closed. I
Giving
think
each
they were
other
closed
COVID.
for over a year
It's great.
out in California. So we were, I think, a much better place to be doing business, certainly since I've been governor.
Great. Let me shift gears here to the topic of education. I want to pull Chris Rufo into the conversation. I know he work with you
Chris
on
Rufo,
some
he's a
initiatives.
bad guy, right?
I think, one other thing that the mainstream media has, I think, bashed on is they've kind of started promoting this narrative that you want to ban books from school libraries. You refuse to teach kids about slavery or other unpleasant realities of American history, or pretend that gay people don't exist. Since many people, I think, in this room, we're now up to, wow, over 271,000 people. So this is, I think, totally unprecedented in terms of the numbers of people we have participating. By the way, I think Twitter's working much better now. I think it crashed because when you multiply 500,000 people in a room by an account with over 100 million followers, which is Elon's account, I think that creates just a scalability level that was unprecedented. But with my meager followership, it seems to be working much better.
It's we have some scaling issues specifically related to my account. At one point in January, if I tweeted above a certain size, it would crash the servers.
Yeah.
And then anyone else who was tweeting at the same time would lose their tweet as well.
So in any event,
issues.
Yeah. Well, we're breaking new ground here. We're
scaling
Are they?
Yes, when there are bugs and scaling issues. But in any event, back to the question I was asking you, Governor DeSantis, about education. The media has been, saying you're trying to ban books. You refuse to teach kids about slavery. You want to say that gay people don't exist. What is the truth of the matter for people who maybe have never heard from you before. And then I want to pull Chris Rufo in on this as well.
Yeah, so the whole book ban thing is a hoax. There's not been a single book banned
It's
in the
right
state of
here. List
Florida.
of
You
books
can
banned in
go
Florida.
buy or use whatever book you want. What we have done is empowered parents with the ability to review the curriculum, to know what books are being used in school, and then to ensure that those books match state standards
Well,
and are
maybe not.
age and developmentally appropriate. So, for example, parents have flagged books in schools that, for example, teach middle school kids how to use sex apps, that provide graphic depictions of sex acts and sex toys for people as young as fifth
These
grade.
books are banned in
And so
Martin County,
clearly
Florida.
that is not appropriate to be in a middle school classroom. And so parents object, and the schools take them out. I did a press conference
Yeah, here's
that
all the
we
books
called
that are
Exposing
banned.
the Book Ban Hoax. And before I had the parents come up, before I spoke, I just played the video that had the images of the books that the parents had objected being in their kids' classroom, and the local news had to cut the feed because they said it was too graphic. Well, if it's too graphic for the 6 o'clock news, how is it okay for a sixth grader or a fifth grader? And so nothing's being banned. They're basically ensuring that we make curation choices that are consistent with state standards. And on
And if they're not within
the
those state
racial
standards, you ban
history,
them.
we eliminated critical race theory from our K through 12 schools. That
It
was the
wasn't
right
it
thing to
wasn't there.
do. In other words, we're
CRT is
not
not a
going to
thing they
take a
teach children.
kid who comes in at 6 years old and say they're an oppressor or oppressed based on what their race is. That's
Nobody was doing
divisive.
that.
That's wrong. We're
Nobody was
also
doing
not
that.
going to be teaching people to hate their country. But what we are going to do is teach the accurate history. So, in the same
The
bill
accurate
that banned
history, baby.
critical
All
race
right.
theory, we required teaching thoroughly about racial discrimination that occurred in American history. And Florida's history standards require all of those subjects, from slavery, Reconstruction, segregation, all of that to be taught, and will continue to do that. So I think what you see is the left and the media colluding on this. They don't want to
They're
actually
colluding.
defend what it is that we are actually legislating or regulating. So they create these hoaxes that somehow you don't want kids to learn that slavery existed in America, which is preposterous. No one actually defends the offending material, and the question is why are there people intent on trying to get this stuff into the classroom? And I think it's part of a political agenda. So our mantra in Florida is this: purpose of the schools is education, not indoctrination. Yes, I think it's very inappropriate to have sexually explicit material in a fifth grade library, 100%. But it's also the case that if you're focusing on that type of instruction, there's an opportunity cost involved. Why shouldn't we be doing more on science or reading or math? And so I think we're getting it right. And I think almost invariably, and Chris Rufo's had to deal with this too, when they're trying to craft these narratives, you just peel back the onion, you realize that this is something they're manufacturing.
Because it's correct. They teach children the right way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I was actually under the impression that there were some books banned, so this is news to me.
Oh.
And there was the one this week was that Miami-Dade County took a book that was about like poems from I think like Biden's inauguration, and they moved it from elementary school library to middle school library. The media tried to act like somehow this is being banned, and you actually had Miami-Dade County Public Schools spokesperson have to come out and say there's nothing that's been banned or removed. It was basically just determined that this particular book was better suited for middle school. And so they put it in the middle school media center. And the media tries to act like somehow that is offending something with a book ban. So, but I think
I hadn't
part of
heard
the
about that,
reason
but I
that
might
they're
look into it
doing
later.
that is because there is actually a movement to ban books from like Amazon and some of these others. California, some municipalities have banned things like To Kill a Mockingbird. What they're trying to do is see if some of these books pass a woke test. And if they don't, they are going against
Woke
some of
test.
those
I'm going to
books.
write the
Whereas in
woke test.
Florida, you can
I'm going
buy
to write the
whatever
woke
book you
test.
want. But that's a different question than what would be appropriate for a third grader or what would be appropriate for a sixth grader. Government, by definition, has to make those choices about what type of curriculum we want to put in front of our students. And the parents obviously have an important voice in that.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, a friend of mine, Tim Urban, who has a blog called Wait But Why, and is really one of the most reasonable people on earth and one of the most reasoned people I've ever met, had a lot of trouble actually publishing his book, simply because it debated sort of sacred cows of woke ideology. But incredibly reasonable book. So that is the kind of de facto book banning and de facto book suppression that I see quite a lot of. Is that publishers are unwilling to take
The
risks.
publishers don't want to publish it because they don't think it'll turn a
Let me
profit.
shift gears here
They get
for
to
a second because
choose
I know
what they
we're running out of
publish,
time.
man.
We're supposed to end, I think, around 4, but 4 Pacific. But thank you for giving us a little bit extra time here, Governor. Shifting gears to a major federal issue, immigration. We see I've seen these videos on social media and on TV of what looks like just insanity at the border. What is your take on what's going on there, and how would you address that as president?
Well, I'd reverse what Biden's doing. You need to shut the border down. You should not be entertaining these asylum claims for people crossing illegally. Asylum is a legitimate thing, but these are people that, when they come, I mean, they're being persecuted. These people coming overwhelmingly are economic migrants that are coming across many other different countries. They should be applying for asylum there if they were truly qualifying for that, but they're not. They know that if they just show up at the southern border, and these are people all over the world that are coming illegally, they know that they will get a sheet of paper saying, okay, come back for a court date in 3 years, and they get released to the interior of our country. It's an
Hire more judges. Do the asylum cases faster.
absolutely insane system. So we'll stop that. We will move on day one by declaring a national emergency. We will construct
Emergency.
a border wall. We will make sure we have remain in Mexico and that we're not
The wall will never work, and it has never worked, and it could never work. The entire wall idea is dumb.
entertaining those claims in that way. And we really need to hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable because they're facilitating a lot of this migration. They obviously
Well, we'll hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable. We'll meet with their leaders. We'll talk to them. We'll bring them in. We'll have some tea, have a little chat, describe to them that we can't have all these people crossing the border. That sounds great.
make money off of it. They treat a lot of these people very horribly as they're trafficking them through Mexico and into the United States. And of course, the cartels have been responsible for moving massive amounts of fentanyl into this country, and that's killing tens of thousands of Americans
Because Americans like drugs. Make drugs legal, and they'll stop doing the fentanyl. The end. People like drugs. They're pretty cool.
every year now. And what they're doing is they lace the other types of drugs with the fentanyl. So you may have like a teenage kid doing something they probably shouldn't do, but in prior generations would not have been fatal. And now, if it's laced with fentanyl, these kids can overdose and die. And so mothers are losing kids as a result of this fentanyl epidemic. And I just don't think you could allow these criminal organizations to continue poisoning our population. So it'll be a day one issue. We will bring overwhelming amount of resources to deal with it, and we are going to stop this insanity once and for all.
Our country was built with slave labor, and it continues to operate on nearly slave labor of those immigrants.
There's a, I think, follow-up question on immigration from Steve Dace, who is a national radio personality and I think an important commentator in the great state of Iowa.
First of all, I want to echo what Congressman Massey said to Elon. Elon, if I put down money on January 1st, 2022, that Twitter was going to be the last bastion of free speech on earth, brother, I'd be about as rich as you are on that bet right now.
Last bastion of free speech. You're kidding me, right?
And the restoration of a lot of accounts of people that were truth tellers and were ran
And
from
Nazis.
here for telling the truth. I saw a meme the other
And
day
liars.
that said, of course you have scientific consensus when you censor all the scientists who disagree. So I
All the
wanted to
scientists
just
who
say
are wrong.
first and foremost, on behalf of a lot of grateful people around the country and the world, really, thank you very much for that and the investment you made in that cause. Thank you. A question is a follow-up to you, Governor, on this very issue with immigration. We have heard a lot over the years, lock her up, drain the swamp, going to build a beautiful wall, Mexico's going to pay for it, and crowds cheered, and everybody loved it, and brands got built, and nothing got done. What is the bottom line assurance that you can make to the people that are listening right now all over the world and all over the country that you can actually do the agenda that you just articulated when others tweeted about it and talked about it, but then couldn't actually follow through?
It's a great question because I share that frustration. I think even my worst critics in Florida will acknowledge when I tell people I'm going to do something, I don't make promises or say I'm going to do something lightly. I've thought it through, and I know that I am going to follow through on what I tell people I'm going to do. So this is one. There will be follow through. Number two, I understand the different leverage points that you would have under Article 2 of the Constitution. I studied that a lot at becoming governor about Florida's Constitution, doing the same thing for the federal Constitution. And you've got to know how to use your leverage to advance what you're trying to accomplish. So, for example, there's leverage that we can use vis-a-vis Mexico that I think presidents have not been willing to do. I think sometimes for political purposes. But I'll look at, okay, what are all the variety of options we can do? Which buttons can I push? And I will do that to be able to bring this issue to a conclusion once and for all. We had Hurricane Ian come through Southwest Florida, Category 4 plus storm, September of 2022, and it did a lot of damage. But one of the things it did, it knocked out a bridge going from the mainland to Pine Island, and it severed the Sanibel Causeway in 3 different locations. And the locals were being told it's going to take 6 months to get that stuff repaired. And so they came to me, even though these were not state-owned bridges, and they said, "Can you help us?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So I got my guys together. I said, "Listen, no bureaucracy, no red tape, and no excuses. Get it done. We need to open these bridges back." Pine Island Bridge reopened 3 days later. Sanibel Causeway opened 2 weeks after that, way, way ahead of schedule, because we wouldn't take no for an answer, and we wanted to make sure we got it done. So for me, it is not a campaign.
Isn't that how China built all those cities so fast? Isn't that a complaint that we have about China? Is that they have a centralized government that tells people what to build and how to build it, and then it does it, and then it happens, and it goes real fast? I don't know. This is weird. This seems slightly authoritarian to me. Hey, we will not take no for an answer. I'm going to put my guys here, and we're going to build this right here and right now. Uh, no bureaucracy, no red tape. That also means no regulation and less accountability, if you ask me.
Slogan that you get in and then forget about it. As an American citizen, if I wasn't running, this would be an issue that bothers me. I've put a lot of my capital as Florida governor involved in combating illegal immigration. We banned sanctuary cities my first year. We just did a strong anti-illegal immigration bill in Florida that's working. I've put marine assets in the Florida Keys to help the Coast Guard repel boats from places like Haiti. I have people at the southern border right now helping Texas, and we've even been able to relocate illegal aliens to places like Martha's Vineyard. So,
How is that was illegally done, and then you passed a law after the fact to make it legal that you did it last week. That was a stunt, and you're going to do it again because you're a stunt man.
I don't think any governor has probably gone out of his way to do more to try to make an impact on this issue. And I'm not going to take no for an answer. And I think our voters are sick of the empty promises. They want to see action.
Thank you, Governor.
Well, Governor, I saw the cover of Time Magazine this week, and I think they were trying to do a negative story because you were sort of scowling in this portrait they made of you. And in the article, they call you, they compared you to the Terminator. And I think they meant insult, but I thought it was kind of cool. I thought it was a good thing because I think we need a cool-headed, ruthless assassin to go in
A
and
cool-headed,
take on the
ruthless
world mob,
assassin. They
take
don't
on
know
our out-of-control
that they
government,
are
and take on problems like the ones at the
oxymorons.
border. So, again, I thought it made you sound great, even though that may
They
not have been
don't
their
know that they're
intention.
hypocrites. They just don't
Well,
know.
look, at the end of the day, this whole business that we're in is about producing results. I don't care about fanfare. I'm the governor, like I'm known, right? And I go around the state and everything, and people are very nice. And so, I appreciate the well wishes, but I don't need any of the fanfare. I don't need any adulation. I just know I'm in a position where I have a chance to make a difference, and I'm either doing it or I'm not. And I remember sitting at the desk in the state capitol my first day as governor 4.5 years ago. I looked around the room. And I thought to myself, I don't know what SOB is going to succeed me in this chair, but they are not going to have anything to do because I'm getting all the meat off the bone. I am going to make sure that I'm leaning into issues and making an impact. And we have done that in the state of Florida. And I bring that exact attitude up to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Governor, I'd love to jump in and follow up on that. This is Chris Rufo, and I've had the honor of working with you in the past few years on critical race theory, gender ideology, and the DEI bureaucracy. And what I've seen up close and personal is that while many conservative politicians, going back decades, have made headlines and got on television playing culture war, they never actually get anything done. And what you've done over the last few years is
because it's not real. The culture war doesn't really exist. Republicans build this crazy-ass culture war, and then they brag about it on TV like Mr. Christopher Rufo there is mentioning, but then they don't do anything because it isn't real. It's not really there. There is no such thing as the culture war. I mean, it's nonsense that they made up so they could scare you into voting for them.
Really astonishing. You've eliminated CRT from all Florida's public institutions. You've stopped gender ideology dead in its tracks in K through 12. And just last week, you eliminated the DEI bureaucracy in all of Florida's public universities. They'll be
telling them what they can and can't teach in their colleges. Freedom. This guy says he's pro-freedom, but then oh yeah, we want freedom, except you can only do what I tell you can do.
Shut down completely. And I think what you've done is established a blueprint for fighting back against the left's long march of the institutions and making sure that those institutions reflect the value of Florida voters, not left-wing activists and the partisan press. So my question for you is, DC is another animal. It's quite different, the scale of the federal government. And how are you going to deliver results? And what is your culture war strategy facing down the swamp in DC?
Well, some of it is similar in this respect. When we're taking on things like DEI, you get blowback from legacy media and the far left. But that's an example of an issue where they are out of step with the vast majority of Americans. It's not just Republicans. It's independents and a lot of Democrats. Because you think about if you're a parent and you've got kids, you want to know when they apply to college, they're going to be judged based on their merit. And they're not going to be roadkill in some type of woke Olympics where they didn't fit some category and so they're denied opportunity. They want to make sure that achievement matters. And so
that's another flaw within capitalism. The colleges can only get so many people, and they have to have the most, and they need stuff like that so that they can maximize their profit. Doing that woke Olympics maximizes a college's profit, make colleges free for everybody. You won't have that problem.
So we get a lot of quiet support for a lot of those things. And so I think what I do, just because, look, I'm a blue-collar kid. I grew up in the Tampa Bay area, working minimum wage to get through school. My grandfather worked in the steel mill in Western Pennsylvania. I just know instinctively kind of what like normal people think about all this stuff. And I have a good sense of when the legacy media and the left are outside of where the average American is, because people want you to be using common sense. And things like DEI, I mean, when I was growing up, I think things were better because people were actually told you should try to get along. Now they're told you need to segregate, and it's just crazy that they're trying to do all this stuff. So by eliminating that, there's a lot of people
CRT doesn't promote segregation,
including people that certainly are not traditional Republicans. And I think there's similar issues when you do in the federal level. It's also the case that there are some tools at the federal level that we don't necessarily have at the state level. For example, some of the problems with the university and the ideological capture, that didn't happen by accident, can trace back all the way to the accreditation cartels. Well, guess what? To become an accreditor, how do you do that? You've got to get approved by the U.S. Department of Education. So we're going to be doing alternative accreditation regimes.
Alternative
where instead of saying you will
to
only
accreditation.
get accredited if you do DEI, you'll have an accreditor that will say, we will not accredit you if you do DEI. We want a colorblind, merit-based accreditation scheme. And so as
you will teach things in college the way we tell you to teach them. Freedom.
President controlling that agency, you can then approve other types of accreditation. So I think part of it is just knowing where all
that'll
the
be biblical
points,
accreditation.
how does it get to the point that
It'll be
we then
religious.
see and that somebody like you will run a report on, like when you see some of the outrageous stuff that's generated in some sociology department at a university. That didn't just happen out of thin air. There's a reason why
Because
we
it's
got to
correct.
that
That's why it
point.
happened. It's
And I
correct.
think that there are some tools with the federal government where you can push back and try to get these institutions moored in a more foundational direction about, hey, we're pursuing truth here, and we're not here to try to impose one niche ideology on the entire student body.
Great. Shifting gears, Dana Lash, you have
Dana
a
Lash,
question or comment for the governor?
the beat
I
lady?
do. And thank you both
With the
so
beats?
much for your time, for joining us in a very new way. I really appreciate that. I think it's really cool. And for your support of free speech, too. And Elon, I have to say thank you for taking the arrows and for unthrottling the accounts of all of us who got in trouble for sharing a New York Post story about a laptop.
It was
And
horseshit.
Governor,
That's why you
I
got in
wanted
trouble.
to thank I wanted
Dummy.
to thank you for your leadership
If you still
and
think it's
your
true, you're an idiot.
unwavering support of Second Amendment rights. And you're on my program tomorrow, and I just got to say, you got my vote in the primary, so I appreciate it very much. You were talking about DEI just a minute ago, and I want to ask you both about this growing threat against natural rights and free enterprise. It's this threat of debanking. Now, I know that, Elon, I've read so much about you and what you've gone through. You've called
Debanking.
ESG criteria evil incarnate. Governor DeSantis, Florida saw financially weaponized wokery earlier this year when Wells Fargo
Financial
Bank dumped
wokery.
both
Oh,
the
no.
business and personal accounts of a very prominent and
Thomas, I might have to have you look into this for me and tell me what it is.
respected gun dealer in Florida. They'd been together for 25 years working with Wells Fargo, and they cited new ESG guidelines. Now, similar to the DOJ's previous Operation Choke Point, all these activists for various causes are using this regulatory guidance to debank what they consider to be politically incorrect businesses for the sake of risk management. Now,
Risk
we say
management,
that our
because they're not
rights
going to make
should
any
not be
money.
infringed upon by the government, but what can and should be done about activist-guided financial institutions?
If your business plan involves so much anti-wokery that you will be a bigot, then the bank won't lend you any money. If I wanted to open a cafe that had a big sign on it that said no blacks, no Jews, then I made that part of my business plan, then the bank wouldn't lend me any money because it wouldn't make money. They wouldn't get their investment back.
And these payment processors who are essentially cutting off law-abiding citizens and businesses.
Well, I think it's a fundamental issue that I think not enough conservatives have been wise to. I think more and more are, but at the end of the day, we have certain fundamental rights. And so maybe you're somebody that is, really excited about your Second Amendment rights. And obviously, if the government comes in and infringes that, we know you blow the whistle on that. That's a problem. But what if Wall Street banks are colluding so that somebody can't function in that space, whether it's running a store or anything involving that? Your rights are still being infringed upon.
They're not doing
in
it
that
for woke
situation.
reasons.
And so I think this
They're
whole
doing it for money
ESG
reasons.
movement is really trying to do through the financial sector what they could never achieve through the ballot box. And so they're trying to do an end run around the constitutional system, and they're really trying to change policy. They're trying to change society, and they're trying to change the scope of people's rights. And so in Florida, I just signed anti-ESG legislation, which said things like no ESG criteria in our pension fund. We got a $180 billion state pension fund. No social credit scores for consumers when they're going to bank. In other words, if you apply for a loan, that loan should be judged based on your credit worthiness, not whether you're genuflecting to the appropriate left-wing causes.
I don't think that happens. I think they're just making this shit up.
Provide protection.
Nobody's doing that.
Against this debanking with the woke banking. No discrimination based on your religion and other things, which we know is happening. So I think it's a fundamental question, but we will not be a free society if major financial institutions can do through the economy what people could not achieve through the ballot box. Our rights will be restricted, will be the end result, and that's not healthy for a free country.
As a follow-up to that, Governor, Dana mentioned Operation Choke Point, and that is a term that's very familiar to crypto companies in Silicon Valley and fintech companies. Basically, it refers to an effort by the federal government, including the SEC, to basically regulate blockchain and crypto companies out of existence. They really feel like they're being driven out of the country. And I'm not talking about
Because most of
scammy
them are
ones or
scams.
the
All crypto's a scam.
totally fake
All of it. You
ones
hear me?
like
Every
FTX,
last
but
bit of
really
it.
high quality, good companies, including
Scam.
companies that are
100%.
public, like Coinbase. And these guys are basically begging the government for just a framework. They're just like, tell us how to operate legally, and we'll do it. You know, I guess where do you come down on this? What is your view, I guess, broadly of Bitcoin and people's right to hold Bitcoin and to transact Bitcoin?
And Dogecoin.
You have every right to do
Oh, and
Bitcoin.
Dogecoin. Yeah, it's super important.
The only reason
Fucking
these
troll.
people in Washington don't like it is because they don't control it. And they're central planners.
Because it's a scam. It's garbage.
They want to have
It's a lie.
control over society. And so
all Bitcoin is a scam. All of it.
To them. And so, as you're saying, they're trying to regulate it out of existence. Look, could Congress enact a statute to ban things like Bitcoin under the Constitution? They may be able to do. I would oppose that. I think people should be able to do Bitcoin. But Congress has never addressed this in this fashion. And for the bureaucracy to just do it on their own and make it so people can't operate in that space, that's what we mean when we say we've got to return the government to the people's elected representatives who are our voice to be able to make these decisions. And so as president, we'll protect the ability to do things like Bitcoin. I think these are people that are sophisticated. They can make decisions. There's risks involved with it, but let them do that. I just do not have an itch to have to control everything that people may be doing in this space. And I think that the current regime, clearly, they have it out for Bitcoin. And if it continues for another 4 years, they'll probably end up killing it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that is the strong feeling of people in Silicon Valley who are in this space. And I think we'll be heartened to hear your answer on that. I mean, the weird thing is that, and there is a huge constituency of crypto Twitter. So for people who are maybe part of political Twitter who are wondering why we're talking about this, it really has a big audience for this topic.
Dogecoin too, I just want to emphasize.
Dogecoin again, because he's a fucking troll.
Bitcoin and Dogecoin. So shout out to all the Doge fans out there.
Even more.
But the weird thing is that this administration, they seem to want to ban Bitcoin, but they want to create a CBDC, which stands for a central bank digital currency. What's your take on that?
So we were the first state just last month. We actually got the Florida legislature to pass a law that says Florida does not recognize central bank digital currency, because some states were actually adding that to the Uniform Commercial Code. The federal government's studying this. We did the opposite and say we did.
Thomas, you and I might have to talk about this later. Central bank digital currency. It's fine if implemented properly. We already use most of our money is digital already. We don't have a single paper note for every single billions of dollars that are floating around. They're transferred across the wires, and most of it doesn't physically exist. It's already there. Just make the right rules, the right laws. And Florida, of course, loves Bitcoin but hates the idea of a government digital currency.
Now, the reason why we did that is because what the Federal Reserve has said is, we're going to consult with Congress. We'll consult with the executive branch. We don't have a CBDC right now, and ideally we would get authorization for Congress. Well, wait a minute. It's not ideally. You must get authorization from Congress. I don't think Congress would authorize it. So if they unilaterally
Congress won't make a decision. They're wieners. They're wimps. They don't want to make decisions.
Try to do this, we're trying to provide protection for people here in Florida. I know Biden did the executive order. They're studying it. I can tell you, if I'm president, we are not doing a central bank digital currency. I think that would be a huge, huge imposition on people's financial freedoms and financial privacy. And oh, by the way, what would the logical result of this be? If the central authority has oversight over this, of course they're going to start imposing ESG criteria. Oh, wait a minute. You filled up your gas tank 3 times this week. You can't do any more. The sky of how they would be able to manipulate this. So I see it as a massive transfer of power from individual consumers to a central authority, and I don't think that that's good for a free society. So I'm a no on central bank digital currency.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Great.
I want to hear your arguments, Thomas.
Well, Governor, I want to thank you for the time. I mean, we could go for hours here, but I know you only had an hour and we've gone over that. So I want to be respectful of your time. I know there's so many people who want to ask questions, and
We
would
should
like.
do it again. I mean, I think it was
Yeah.
fun. I think this is great, and we'll make sure that that we come back and do it again. This is a great platform. I mean, I would like to see other platforms going in the same direction, but you know, a healthy democratic society needs the robust debate. So I just want to thank everybody for listening in, and I'll just make that pitch again. You know,
That's the end of that. What's going to happen? Donald Trump is going to eat this guy for breakfast. 100%. Donald Trump is going to just demolish this guy during the primary debates. And if somehow DeSantis wins the primary, Donald Trump will run as a third party, and Biden wins it in a walk-off. Yeah, that's just what's going to happen. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, if you want to chime in, I usually try to stream Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Press the like button, press the subscribe button, and follow me and cancel me on Twitter.